What is the main source of funding for these terrorist camps?
Always several ways. First of all, if they have a territory, they will exploit natural resources in them. They will tax the routes. They will do kidnapping for ransom, extortion. That is the main criminality, smuggling, protection of smuggling routes. All of this is a way of getting money. The biggest fundraising happened between 2002 all the way until 2015 was, in fact, hostages. It's lucrative.
But you were involved in funding, right? Raising funds.
Nominally, the whole idea is to check on those who were fundraising and to make sure that they are doubling and tripling their efforts for the fundraising, especially those who were in London and Paris and Berlin and Stuttgart and Amsterdam and all of these places, and they were doing it through dedicated donations or criminality.
Do they use drugs and arms weapons and all of these smuggling money?
They did not smuggle themselves. What they did is that in places like between Afghanistan and Iran, they were protecting the caravans. So they were taking money for the protection, not for the actual drugs itself. They didn't get involved. It was like a very weird thing. Look, I'm not going to, trade in pork, but I'm going to tax the pork that is being sold, or passing through. So it's like I'm not going to touch something that is prohibited, but I'm going to tax, the process through which this prohibited item is passing through. It's like, okay, fine. It's like a nice way of justifying taking money for something that is perfectly criminal.
But then Al-Qaeda would never sell drugs?
Themselves, no.
Because they believe that this is wrong?
Yeah, they believe they wouldn't sell alcohol. They wouldn't be engaged in, let's say, sex slavery or sex trafficking. There are things they wouldn't touch because, again, this God-fearing thing, they think that, I will be, putting in my mouth, a bread that is bought by something that is completely forbidden. So they wouldn't touch these things, but they would actually smuggle weapons. And they have no problem with that because weapons are not in themselves forbidden item.
Why?
Yeah, basically, is there any? Is it similar to pork or to sex with minors or something like that? Of course not.
Okay, and I was speaking to a British intelligence officer, MI6 chief. He said, even today, largely every terrorist group is funded by every gram of cocaine which is sold all amongst the top cities in the world. So any young person who's buying cocaine is not realizing that they're not buying fun, they're buying terrorist activities. Is that true?
That is true in the case of Hezbollah. When it comes to Hezbollah and the IRGC, they have a different ruling on that, religious ruling, that as long as these drugs do not find their way into the hands of young Shia Muslims, that's fine. So they used drugs to, undermine Sunni Muslim states like Egypt, Turkey, Saudi, UAE, and Kuwait by flooding the market with Captagon and Coke and other kinds of drugs, because they used it as societal warfare. So to undermine these societies, they do that, and it's part of their also fundraising activity. That's why, for example, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, were not the narco terror organizations. Hezbollah and the IRGC are, but that doesn't mean that these people are more principled than the others. For example, ISIS traded, just to let you know, with human organs. Every time they executed someone or beheaded someone, there are always doctors ready, with the coolers and everything and all of that, and they go and they dissect the body after that, and they send it to Turkey for the trade in human organs. They did that. So, it doesn't mean basically one terrorist is more fluffy than the other or more cute. No, they are all, evil, but some, engage in different kind of evil.